Most of the time when we talk about the boom in oil production in the U.S., we focus on costs and the environment. But the boom has also led to a major rise in how much oil is being moved around the country by rail. In fact, that amount has quadrupled since 2005. And that is leading to growing worries over safety risks. One of the biggest safety concerns, explosive train derailments in the U.S. and Canada. The most deadly came in July of last year, when an unmanned runaway train carrying crude oil barreled off the rails in a small town in Quebec. 47 people died in the explosion and fire. The oil on that train was coming from the Bakken oil fields in North Dakota, a site for much of the oil boom since 2006. Facilitated by a form of extraction known as hydraulic fracturing. 2/3 of the oil produced in the Bakken Formation today is shipped by rail, as is roughly 10% of all U.S. oil output. Last December, a BNSF train in Castleton, North Dakota, struck another train, igniting 10 cars and spilling 400,000 gallons of crude oil. Ethanol, which is also increasingly carried by rail, was the cargo in a 2009 train derailment in Cherry Valley, Illinois. One person was killed in that accident. Now, the National Transportation Safety Board is working with other agencies on new steps to improve the safety of the rail shipments. For the record, BNSF Railway is a NewsHour underwriter. This afternoon, Canadian regulators announced that they will phase out older rail cars like the ones involved in the Quebec accident by May 2017. Between 65 and 80,000 of them are carrying flammable liquids in North America. This week, the U.S. National Transportation Safety Board has been meeting on these very issues, and I'm joined now by its chairman, Deborah Hersmann. Welcome to the NewsHour.
Hello.
So is there a consensus on why there have been as many accidents as there have been with explosions and the kind of mayhem we've seen?
So I think the important thing to understand is we can prevent these accidents. So we've got to figure out how to prevent them. And that means keeping the trains from derailing in the first place or keeping them from having collisions. And so we've got to work on that. Most of these events are caused by either human failure, human factors issues, or track defects. And so we've got to fix those two issues. And then the second piece of it is the mitigation, the tank cars, and making those tank cars more crash worthy if you do have an accident. And then the final piece of it is the response, because no community is prepared for a worst case scenario if you lose the entire contents of one of these unit trains.
So in terms of making the cars, making this transport safer, what needs to be done that isn't being done right now?
So I think focusing on the prevention, keeping the trains from derailing in the first place or those collisions from happening. And that means the industry has to do a number of things. Do better inspections of the track. Make sure that those trains don't collide, that your workers aren't fatigued, that they aren't tired. We've got to make sure that we prevent the accidents in the first place. But when it comes to the tank cars...
Let me just stop you there. Is that happening now?
Well, we do have some voluntary agreements from some of the railroads about reducing train speeds. That'll reduce some of the risk if there is a collision or an accident, and doing more frequent inspections of the rails. These are good things that people have agreed to do voluntarily, but more needs to be done because we really need to get to zero accidents, not just fewer accidents, but zero accidents. When it comes to the tank cars, there's a lot of conversation now about improving the crashworthiness and the integrity of these cars that are out there. And you talked about it, tens of thousands of them.
And so should the U.S. do what the Canadian regulators have just today announced they're going to do, and that is require that the older cars be phased out?
That's in fact what the NTSB recommended several years ago. You showed earlier the Cherry Valley accident involving the ethanol train. We said they either need to retrofit or phase out these DOT 111 tank cars carrying crude or ethanol.
So it's already been recommended. Has it happened?
It has not happened. I think we certainly applaud the Canadians for taking swift action, and today we really challenge the U.S. regulators to follow suit, to move forward with safety improvements.
So where's the holdup? I mean, the reporting I've been reading today is that the railroad industry is saying these cars, among other things, they're saying these cars need to be upgraded, and they're looking to the oil industry, the oil companies, to do that upgrading. The oil companies are pushing back, saying, "Wait a minute, where's the evidence?" How do you read all of this?
Well, I think clearly there are a lot of different interests here. We heard from the petroleum industry, we also heard from the rail industry, and we heard from the people who manufacture and own the tank cars. Everybody has got to work together to try to solve this problem. It's not going to go away if we don't invest in better tank cars and make sure we invest in preventing those accidents in the first place.
Does the NTSB, your agency, have the clout to make the things happen that need to happen?
We investigate the accidents and we make recommendations. It's up to other people to implement our recommendations. These recommendations have been on the books for several years. I think we're very disappointed that they haven't moved faster, but I'll tell you this issue is getting a lot of attention now that we've had some accidents here on this side of the border. We've seen what happened in Lac-Mégantic, Quebec. I think a lot of politicians and others are paying attention, and there's pressure on the industry and the regulators to make a change.
And I assume that's part of the reason you're here tonight to talk about.
That's right.
To talk about this. But I was also reading today, Deborah Hersmann, that among other things, the oil industry is being criticized for not being transparent enough about the cargo it carries, how it carries it, its own safety rules and regulations. Help us understand that a little better.
You know, I think the important thing to understand here is this boom is a really good thing when we talk about energy independence for the United States. It's a good thing for U.S. jobs, and it is, there's a lot of good here, but you have to do the work that needs to be done to protect the safety of the people who are working along the lines, people who live along the lines, and the environment. And unfortunately, they got way ahead with the business case, and the safety regulations were not there keeping track.
You mean the oil industry got way ahead?
The oil industry, they found this oil and they were extracting it. And the rail industry, these unit trains, 100-car trains of crude oil or ethanol, they're really essentially moving pipelines.
And do you see productive conversations underway now? I mean, do you believe that that this discussion is moving in a positive direction, or is it stuck at this point?
Well, I think we heard today, we had those industries represented, and I will tell you they had very different perspectives, but I think at some point you're going to have some adult supervision, and that's going to need to come from the regulator to step in and say, we've had enough accidents, we've had enough work on trying to get to a consensus, this is what the standard needs to be, and that's in fact what the Canadians are beginning to do right now, and I think we have got on this side of the border to step up to the plate, or we're going to have two levels of safety. You're going to have on one side of the border certain provisions, and then on the U.S. side, it won't be the same.
Deborah Hersmann is the chairman of the National Transportation Safety Board. We thank you.
Thank you.